Welcome back, everyone. This is day 3 of Career Week, and I am your host, Ann Dolan. We've covered a lot of ground this week, and from how AI is changing the whole work landscape to application mistakes that cost young candidates a callback. But today we're ending on something I think is really empowering because the truth is, your student, your young adult, doesn't have to wait for the perfect internship or a great part time job to start building a compelling professional story. This afternoon, we're talking about how to open doors before the traditional experience is even there. So I'm really excited to have an expert with me today. Please welcome back Britt Chill. Britt has been working with college students and recent grads through the full job search process for 15 years now, and we're super excited to have her on our team. Her expertise is in resume strategy, interview prep, and targeting job search planning. So a lot of strategy instead of just applying to lots of jobs. And she supports applicants in optimizing AI use, which is so important these days. Britt has a master's in higher education administration and counseling and a background in career development. So Britt, welcome back.
Thank you. So excited to be here today.
Awesome. All right. So let's start out with identity capital. It's kind of a unique term, but it's so important. What is it?
Yes, it is a fancy way of basically summarizing or the sum of all of the skills, the relationships, like weak ties that we've talked about in other webinars, experiences, and the stories that shape people into who they are both professionally and personally. And this is what we work with students to identify about themselves to then turn it into a narrative that we can help present to employers for opportunities for them.
So let's talk about some examples of this identity capital. And if you could specifically talk about how do you help kids develop it? So let's
Yes.
take a look at these examples and start there.
Yes. So, and these I would say are the most common examples. We'll talk a little bit more about those that I think kind of hide in plain sight. But some of the more common examples are things like leadership roles, and that can be in clubs, organizations, athletic teams, campus organizations for students that are at university, volunteering and community involvement, and that could even just be something that they do because they enjoy it, research or freelance projects, as well, of course, as internships and on-campus jobs. And what I work with students on is pulling out details about these experiences. I often work with students who, of course, they're thinking about what a part-time job or internship might look like on their resume, but they're not thinking about the fact that maybe they were a treasurer for a university club for several years and what that could translate to on a resume. So I work with students on translating that for them to show them how they can add value to their materials with that.
Yeah, I love that, Britt. It's so important. So tell us a little bit about this. How do you put this experience on your resume?
Yes. So just like Jen talked about yesterday, when it comes to common application mistakes, it is important to talk about translating skills by using things like metrics with specific outcomes. And I think some examples of, like I mentioned, experience that hides in plain sight that can be really compelling to add to a resume are things like class and group projects because it demonstrates teamwork. It can show project coordination, which, even if you're not wanting to be a project manager, are a big skill today. Giving presentations, often when it comes to the work that students will end up doing, even if they're not in front of people all the time and work with data one-on-one most of the time, there will come a point where they will have to present that data somewhere. So getting opportunities to get in front of people is a huge skill that's hiding. For those students that love performance or theater, don't necessarily think about how that may help their careers moving forward. And then, of course, like we talked about, being involved in student organizations. A big one is helping with a family business. I've had some students who are literally doing like operations level work at their family business and not thinking, oh, that might translate to something important on my resume. Also, content creation. So many use social media every day and are making videos or picture collages of all different things using so many softwares, some of which I may have never even heard of, and don't realize how transferable that is on the job market. So, those are kind of examples of, I think, skills that hide in plain sight, along with their hobbies like gaming communities, their church or community involvement, freelance projects, and then any software or AI tools that they're using just in the course of their everyday. These are all the types of experiences that students have that they often don't consider carry any weight, that I work with them to help translate into something that makes their resumes really stand out and sound unique rather than kind of blending in.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why these experiences matter.
Yes. So, one thing that I think it's important to understand, I like to always say that employers and recruiters kind of speak in their own language in the sense that they're looking for key things. And it's important to look at these experiences through that lens because I think it helps from the candidate side understand better how to present it. So, for extracurricular involvement, that might just have been a way for students to fill time because of their interests, or maybe they thought, yeah, it would look good on a resume, but maybe don't understand why. And what that tells employers, for example, for extracurriculars, teamwork and team dynamics, which are important in an office setting, remote or in person, communication, initiative. By doing job shadowing, that might just seem like you're going to work with someone for a day to see what they do. But those types of experiences are low pressure experiential learning, exposure to not just experiences, but people in the field, which when we get to talking about networking is very important. And then, of course, with things like internships, part-time jobs, and volunteering, it's applied experience, building relationships, accountability. Those are all super important skills. And knowing that those things that students are doing contain those skills is so incredibly important and can be the difference between having a standout profile versus not.
I love that. When this is a few years ago, but we had interns come into our office, and it was really more like a job shadow, but they'd come for a couple weeks and they'd sit in on meetings and they'd follow me or another employee around. And I thought that was awesome for them to learn about business and just being in an office. And I think what you're saying is something even like that could be on a resume.
Absolutely. The idea is that it's exposure and it's giving the student information, but it's exposing the student in a networking capacity to all of those people, relationship building. I think a good example of this, I worked with a student studying international business, and a part time job that they had was working front desks at hotels. And this was in Miami, Florida, which is an incredibly well-traveled city, so that get a lot of travelers from all over the world. And the student didn't think that that experience would translate to their international business major at all, even though I explained customer service is a skill that will transfer one to any industry. That's basic. But dealing with people from all over the world, communicating, building relationships, that's all absolutely international business specific. So that's an example of why I really try to dig deep with students, because sometimes the things that seem obvious to me as a career coach doesn't even dawn on them that they're doing something really interesting and directly related to their goals.
Yeah, that's so true. I remember when my youngest son was putting together his resume, and he had this little side hustle of making videos for local bands, and he had a business license, and he made money from it. It was like part of his life. And he didn't think about that as something he could put on his resume, but he did it for a while. And um, it's something like that you're right, young people don't think of as important, but it is for sure. All right. So sometimes, though, kids don't have a formal internship or they may not have a glowing part-time job, or something that they feel is worthy to go onto their resume. What are some alternatives to like, a high level internship? Because those are hard to get, right?
They are, especially in the last few years, for so many reasons. But some of these that I think could be great substitutes are fairly obvious, and we even touched on some of them, like part-time jobs, volunteering, project-based work. But I think some of the ones that are less considered or thought about are things like boot camps, competitions, summer programs, things that are skill building and exposure to industry, even if they're not necessarily directly work related, but they are industry related, which makes a difference. Another big one that I think really had its boon during the pandemic, but really still holds an important place now, are virtual internships. There are so many opportunities online for students to do things as short as like 5 to 10 hour job simulations on some platforms to full 8 to 15 week virtual internships with actual employers where they're able to do it without necessarily being location bound somewhere, because some of the logistics of doing an internship can be difficult, whereas these virtual opportunities are often either short term or just easy enough to get into, in the sense that it doesn't require a ton of coordination logistically. And these are hugely valuable, not just because they're experience, but because so many roles in the workforce today are either remote or hybrid or a mix. Getting that remote experience directly in their industry is also incredibly valuable. So I do feel like virtual internships are often like slept on, if you want to put it that way, when it comes to things that students can do to really build up an interesting profile.
How do you find out about them? That sounds so cool.
Yes. Well, one, when I work with students, I like to kind of identify where they are, and I often make recommendations based on how certain they are. Like if they know for sure they're interested in a certain industry or type of role, then I'm getting them involved in the 8 to 15 week internship online. If they're really not sure yet and want to explore a couple things, I'm going to suggest a few 5 to 6 hour job simulations so they can see what it's like to do work on a day-to-day basis in a specific area to help give them some clarity. But either way, even just searching online now can yield a ton of opportunities for virtual internships. So there are a lot of ways to find them. But if you're not sure, can absolutely work with me on that.
What do you recommend, if you're worried about your resume, you don't have enough, valid responsibilities or jobs. Would you do a virtual internship during like your last year of college, after you've graduated and you're looking for a job? That seems like a good time too.
Yes, I think the importance of it is getting the experience. Even if your student or you have graduated, keeping momentum going, like showing that you're still looking to gain skills and experience, is just as important as the experience itself, because it shows that there's no gaps on the resume, that you're continually working on building and improving. So when it comes to virtual internships, I think another benefit is that it's never too late, whereas some in-person internships will restrict it based on graduation year and status. So I think there's some more flexibility with virtual as well.
I really love that idea. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about networking because this can be so hard for many students and young adults. And they want to network, but I had a student once told me like, I don't want to be fake. Have you ever heard that?
All the time. And I think from a career coach perspective, it doesn't help that we package it immediately by telling them to make an elevator pitch. I think the idea of a pitch automatically gives it a transactional quality to it, which for students who, are in touch with that, understand that it makes them feel fake. So I think it's important to kind of come at it from a more authentic angle and think of it really as a getting to know people perspective versus a seeing what people can do for me perspective or trying to sell it perspective.
Mhm. What about you? You've talked about before building, maintaining relationships. It's easy to get a connection, but for a lot of kids, it's maintaining it. That's like the secret sauce because you never know when that person can be helpful to you in the future.
Exactly. And there are easy ways to be able to do that. It can be as simple as engaging with people's content, whether it's on LinkedIn or social media, if it's a business owner who has socials. It's basically staying visible and engaged. Or it can be as easy as checking in once a year and saying, hey, it's been a while since we talked. Just wanted to see how things are going. I noticed X, and maybe it's referring to something they shared recently. It doesn't have to be hard or a heavy lift to simply do it. Think of it how we reach out to friends we haven't talked to in a while. Hey, it's been a minute. How are things going? It can be as simple as that.
Or I saw this article and I thought of you type of
Yes.
thing. I once well for a number of years I volunteered with James Madison University with their mentorship program in their College of Business. And I noticed every semester I'd have a different student that some kids were really good at that and some kids it was harder. But my last student, she was so good at it. She said to me one time, I'm having a hard time keeping track of everybody. And I said, what if you had a spreadsheet? We actually talked about one of the things we do with kids, put the name, the company, the date you started to reach out, what you talked about, and then keep a track of when you reach out again. But she ended up keeping me updated as to what she was doing. Oh, I had this interview. Oh, I got this job offer from Deloitte. She ended up working there, but it was awesome. And whenever I had a connection for her or she had a question for me, I was always quick to make it because she was, really good about staying in touch. And I think that's what you're saying, just be visible.
Absolutely. And it sounds like she was also authentic about it, right? Because I think there's some hesitance where maybe you feel comfortable making the initial connection, but how do you make the follow up sound natural? By keeping you updated in a way, because I think in some ways she likely credited that to your help, that was an easy way to keep the conversation going. So that's a great example.
It's so funny because we know with my own kids, I would share with them things like that. What if you had a spreadsheet and you kept track? And they didn't always want to hear it from me, but the minute somebody else said it to them, they were like willing to do it. So sometimes that's part of things we see that you as a career coach can get kids to do things that, to many of adults, it's kind of like common sense, but they don't always want to hear it from a parent.
Yes, the vehicle for that information can sometimes make a difference for sure.
I hear ya. All right, so let's talk a little bit about networking and how it can help with identity capital that we've just talked about.
Yes, and we covered some of this, but in general, I think it's important to look at what some students might be hearing that I would consider more of a myth versus what actually works. And I think common myths that I often hear from college students are they're talking about, just add as many people as possible on LinkedIn for visibility. Whereas what actually works is being more targeted and building actual relationships and only adding the people that you have worked to build connection with. Another one is asking people for jobs or help immediately, instead of building a relationship, thinking and asking thoughtful questions about them, such as, you're working in my dream job. I'd love to hear, your career trajectory. Like, how'd you get there? Actual genuine questions that might give you information that could be helpful to you, but is showing a genuine interest rather than making it just seem transactional. We also touched on being overly polished or fake. And I think this is where tapping into genuine curiosity is really important. Rather than asking necessarily the questions you think you should, what are questions you actually have? Like, if it's someone works on something interesting in a company, like, one, how'd you get into that role? Or two, what's it like to build something like that? Like, questions you actually have, because one, they can tell, but two, it's going to build a more sincere relationship. Um, and then just lastly is a myth is only focusing on recruiters, when really, though it's an important population, you can build and should be building connections with everyone, because sometimes it's a hiring manager or somebody who works under a hiring manager that is looking for a specific role who you might connect with, who says, hey, this person is really interesting. I've been talking back and forth with them. They might be a good fit for this role. That's how that actually works. So building connections with everybody and not just recruiters, I think, is a big thing as well.
It just what you said about asking somebody, oh, how did you get into that role? What made you go into that field? Tell me about your career trajectory. Makes me think of this saying somebody once shared with me: ask for a job and get advice. Ask for advice and get a job. To your point, you're really asking out of curiosity, you're being authentic, you're wanting to know. And a lot of those conversations are going to result in something more than saying, do you have an opening?
Exactly.
Right?
Because that person knows that you're coming at it from a place of sincere curiosity and wonder and wanting to pick their brain versus look for an in. I think, and that makes a big difference when talking and connecting with people.
And I'm wondering if you're more likely to get those conversations from your alumni network instead of going in LinkedIn and looking for people in tech sales, but finding people that went to James Madison University or University of Richmond or, wherever, and connecting that way. Do you think that's a stronger pull?
I think alumni networks are a very untapped opportunity for students. Most alumni not only are the type that are willing to come back to the university and speak on employer panels, but they are the ones that can help, I think, build relationships moving forward as well. So alumni networks are so important to tap into. And universities often sponsor events that help do meet and greets. So those are so important to attend if you have one on campus.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you for that, Brett. So I know you believe that this is kind of a longer term game. It's not just, oh, change your resume and get a job, but there's a little bit more to it. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, I think the best way to sum it up when it comes to all of this identity, capital, networking is employers have a strategy. Like we talked about in previous sessions over the past couple days, they use AI and an applicant tracking system to cast a really wide net to help them navigate the landscape of current job seekers. And there are a lot of job seekers out there. So, recent grads or those looking to career switch also need to have a strategy. It's no longer a time where you can really go in blind and just send in tons of applications and hope that something sticks. With a strategy, which is something that I'm here to help work on, one, it's going to save a lot of time and energy, which we already know job searching can be frustrating in the best of times, right? So, but also by having a strategy, it's going to help make applications more intentional and therefore more likely to get a response or opportunity to interview. So I think that's the most important piece to hold on to there, is that this is all meant to be part of a broader strategy that we are here to help build. That way, students can get somewhere, whatever that might look like.
Thanks for that, Brett. All right, before we go to Q&A, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what you do when working with kids on a daily basis.
Yes, I love to get to know the student, their natural interests and skills and abilities, as well as what they envision for themselves, and use that to establish a baseline. Then we work on things like career exploration. We do work on networking, executive function systems for time management and organization, right? Because sometimes it's not just about the career development work, it's also just about keeping it all organized because it's often a lot. Accountability and follow through. It's not enough to just send hundreds of applications out into the void. You have to follow up and keep track as well. And then, of course, how to use AI as a partner in the search to make things more tailored and intentional. So those are all not even a truly exhaustive list, but some of the things that we work on in sessions depending on where a student is in their own development.
Thank you for that, Britt. And if some of the things rang true for you that Britt shared and you would like more information on working with her, we'd love to talk to you. You can schedule a call by going to our website, ectutoring.com, and at the top, you'll see a drop down for career coach and career coaching, and you can set up a time to talk. All right, Britt. Oh, and by the way, we have a survey after this, so if you wouldn't mind filling it out, that would be amazing. So our first question is about social media. It's from Kate. She says, "Do you think recruiters or employees are likely to really search for applicants on social media and analyze their content, or only if the applicant lists a handle that they want seen with their application?"
Great question. And I think the answer is truthfully a mix of everything that you shared. I think there are going to be some organizations, especially depending on the role, where whether a handle is included or not, they're going to look because they're thinking about it in the context of how, depending on the role they're applying for, that may reflect overall. They're thinking about things like PR, things along those lines. In terms, I think, of decision making when it comes to hiring. Now, it is more common for students to share their handles because the content creation aspect of social media has become more relevant than ever to being part of the job process. So many job descriptions, even in things like engineering or computer science, include something about familiarity with social media and content creation. So I think that it's an important balance to strike. And it's important to keep that in mind as your students are thinking about what they're posting. Very few places are necessarily going to just be searching every single person's social media, but it is something to keep in mind.
For sure. I agree with you. I think what you said, be thoughtful of that when you're posting.
Yes.
For sure. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Britt. That was super helpful. I appreciate you being our guest today and throughout college week. It was really a pleasure to be with you today. And I hope to everyone out there, this was helpful to you as your young adult navigates the job search process. We wish you all the very best, and I hope everybody has an amazing day. Thank you for joining us. Bye bye.